Lord forgive me for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack making backflip. Telly Hank with the action. With the vital speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews, how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby Maine. Just caught a touchdown from the bay.
Those guys, remember all those guys used to be out there, Prince and those guys?
Yeah, of course.
Prince used to be in Brownfield.
To all the hoods, to all the neighborhoods, to all the people out there, especially the children, our children, teenagers, and our young adults. Most importantly, it's time for us to think several moves ahead. If you don't know how to play chess, maybe you should start to play chess, because in chess, the ones who win in chess are the ones who think several moves ahead. Many of the grandmasters that play chess, they be 13 moves ahead. They know exactly, almost to the T, what's going to happen 13 moves ahead. So in this case, the reason why I'm saying this is because sometimes as black people, when we was growing up, we weren't raised sometimes to think several moves ahead, like several years ahead, plan way ahead of time. Okay. You know, and because sometimes we're caught up in the environment. And don't get me wrong, this call is from a federal prison. I love the neighborhood I grew up in. I love even the ghetto.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, sometimes you gotta think outside the box. I read a book by Trevor Noah called Born a Crime. You familiar with that book?
No. Talk to me.
Okay, in that book, Trevor...
Y'all already know what it is. We back. It's your guy Popalot. Mob, gang. We on our way to NYC with it. Headshot City. Queens to be exact. Y'all go ahead and meet us in Baisley Park. This shit about to get sinister. Now, when we talk about the game in the 1980s, and especially in New York, a lot of names get thrown out there, especially the popular names like Fat Cat, King Tut, Alpo, AZ, Rich Porter, Supreme. The list goes on and on. But when we start to talk about the most violent of those people during that era, one name that particularly comes to mind is going to be the person that we are covering today, and that person is going to be Gerald Prince Miller. Now, for those that are not familiar with Gerald Prince Miller, he was second in command of the notorious Supreme team right under Kenneth Supreme McGriff, and he also happened to be Supreme's nephew. Now, with the Supreme Team documentary recently being released, I had a lot of requests asking me to cover Gerald Prince Miller. Now, his story was very familiar in my mind, but with going back and looking at it, I totally understand why 50 Cent said in the Ghetto Quran that Preem was the businessman and Prince was the killer. And a lot of times when you see people telling the story about the Supreme Team, you will notice that they mention the downfall kind of really occurred when Gerald Prince Miller was running the organization. And that's even though it was a lot of underlying circumstances that also kind of put a focus on the Supreme Team and just the drug trade in general at that time in Queens. And if any of y'all are familiar with the Fat Cat story and his relationship to Pappy Mason, you can almost mirror the circumstances of them two with Prince and Supreme. The one underlier is that Supreme never testified against his nephew, Gerald Prince Miller. So according to the federal government, they're going to say that Gerald Prince Miller took over the operations of the Supreme Team right around 1987 while Kenneth McGriff was serving time upstate. And it would be during that time that the Supreme Team, who was already known for making money, as the government alleged that they went from making around $200,000 a day to upwards of $500,000 a day at the height of the organization. But during the time that Prince Miller was running it, they were one of the most violent organizations that the game had ever seen. Now, Prince Miller, who was arrested in 1987, but then released in 1989 to kind of reorganize the Supreme Team's drug operation. And though he committed violent acts before that 1987 conviction, it would be in July of 1989 where he would really take it to the next level when, according to the federal government, a guy by the name of Gus Rivera, who was the Supreme Team member, had introduced the gang to some Colombian suppliers. According to the government, they would say members of the Supreme Team that was being ran by Gerald Prince Miller at the time would go on to kidnap 4 Colombian drug suppliers, with the government only being able to identify them by first name, Fernando and Jorge. But at trial for these murders that the government alleged was committed by Prince Miller and 4 other members of the Supreme Team, they were unable to present evidence as to the identities or the bodies of the suppliers. And the jury at this trial would determine that the government was not able to prove those murders beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, it would be a month after those alleged murders in August of 1989 where Supreme Team member Gus Rivera, who had linked the gang with the alleged Colombian suppliers, would become the next target of the gang, where they would figure he was probably a loose end connecting them to those murders. So he would allegedly be shot in a Baisley Park courtyard, but after surviving said shooting, he would go into hiding from the Supreme Team. And it would be at that time where Gus Rivera's girlfriend would be contacted by a member of the Supreme Team, and her life would be threatened if she didn't detail the location of to where he was hiding out. She would go on to give the information to the gang, where they would track him down to a Queens motel room where he would allegedly be murdered. Now, based on the government's accounts, 1989 was a very active year for the Supreme Team, because it would be in that same month of August 1989 where the government would allege that the gang was also responsible for the murders of another pair of drug suppliers, 2 gentlemen by the name of Fernando Suarez and Pablo Perlaza. Now, based on the government's evidence, they would determine that the pair would be led to an apartment in Baisley Park under the assumptions that they were going to perform a drug deal. And it would be there where they would be held at gunpoint by a gentleman by the name of Julio Hernandez, while 2 other members of the Supreme Team would go on to bound them with tape. It would be then, according to evidence, where the 2 Supreme Team members would place plastic bags over the heads of the suppliers, where they would proceed to murder them with baseball bats. So when you talk about violent, you definitely want to mention this era of the Supreme Team. And it would be a year from a lot of that violence in March of 1990, where after lengthy investigations, several members of the Supreme Team, along with Gerald Prince Miller, would be charged by state authorities. But it would be a separate 14-count superseding indictment that the government would hand down that would essentially charge all the defendants with racketeering and RICO charges that would lead to the sentence that Gerald Prince Miller is serving right now. Now, depending on who you ask, some people would say that Gerald Prince Miller was just holding the Supreme Team down, and others would say that his acts of violence brought the organization down, as the old saying goes that violence brings in police. I think I already know the answer, but I definitely want to know what y'all think. But more than that, I want to know if y'all think that Gerald Prince Miller was probably the most violent person in New York at that time to come out of the drug trade. I'm going to have to rank him right there at the top of the top. But y'all let me know what y'all think. This shit got popular. Y'all get in the comment box. Y'all let me know what y'all think, who we need to cover, where we need to go, what's up next. Y'all make sure y'all hit the red subscribe button right under this video. And y'all follow me on Instagram and IG, POP_A_LOT. And we be back real soon. MOBB.